The morning I noticed the gate didn't creak anymore, I knew something was wrong. It had always creaked. 42 years of the same sound, low, stubborn, like an old man clearing his throat before speaking. I built that gate myself back when my hands didn't shake and my back didn't argue with me every time I bent down. White oak, heavy hinges, set deep into the post so it would hold through storms. Now it opened smooth, quiet. Someone had oiled it. I stood there longer than I needed to, one hand resting on the wood, feeling the grain beneath my fingers. The sun was barely up, light stretching thin across the land. 10 acres of it. Every inch something I'd worked on, fixed, built, or buried. My name's Walter Briggs, 68. Retired carpenter, though I don't think men like me ever really retire. We just slow down until the world forgets what we used to be good at. I stepped through the gate and walked the path toward the house. Gravel crunched under my boots, still uneven near the left side where the ground dips. I'd been meaning to fix that. Been meaning to fix a lot of things. The house stood where it always had. 2 stories. Wide porch. Cedar siding I'd installed myself the summer my son turned 10. Back when he still followed me around with a hammer too big for his hands. I paused at the bottom step. The front door was open, just a few inches, enough to let the smell out. Coffee, fresh. I hadn't made coffee yet. For a second I just stood there listening. Silence has a way of getting louder when it's not supposed to be there. Then I heard it, a chair leg scraping lightly against the kitchen floor. I stepped inside. Hello. My voice came out rough like I hadn't used it in days. In here. His voice, Daniel. I moved toward the kitchen slowly, not because I couldn't walk faster, but because something in me didn't want to rush the moment. Like if I took my time, I could hold on to whatever this was just a little longer. He stood by the counter, back to me, pouring coffee into one of the old mugs. The chipped blue one his mother used to like. He'd shaved, clean shirt, city clothes, didn't look like he belonged here anymore. "You're up early," he said like it was nothing. Like he hadn't driven 3 hours without telling me. I leaned against the doorway. "So are you." He turned then, gave me a small smile, not the kind that reaches the eyes, more like something practiced. "I oiled the gate," he said. "Hope that's okay." I nodded once. It worked fine the way it was. He shrugged. "It was loud." "It was supposed to be." That sat between us for a moment. He handed me the mug. I took it. Our fingers didn't touch. The coffee was strong, too strong, just how I used to make it. Funny how people remember things like that even when they forget everything else. We stood there in the kitchen, both pretending we weren't measuring the distance between us. "You didn't call," I said. "Thought I'd surprise you." "You did." Another pause. He looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. His eyes moved over the cabinets, the old clock on the wall, the table with the burn mark near the edge. "That's still there?" he asked, nodding at the mark. I glanced at it. "You made that, tried to fix a loose nail with a hot screwdriver." He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah, I remember." But the way he said it, it didn't sound like remembering. It sounded like reading from a story he'd heard a long time ago. We sat down at the table. The same table I built 30 years back, maple top, solid legs. It had held dinners, arguments, birthdays, silence. More silence than anything else these days. "So," I said, "what brings you out here?" He wrapped both hands around his mug, staring into it like the answer might be floating there. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "About this place." I didn't say anything. "I mean, it's a lot for one person, Dad. 10 acres, the house, the upkeep." "I manage." "I know you do, but for how long?" There it was, not sharp, not loud, just placed carefully on the table between us. I leaned back in my chair. It creaked. At least something still did. "I didn't ask for help," I said. "I'm not saying you did." "Sounds like you're offering it anyway." He exhaled through his nose, a small sign of impatience. "I'm just trying to be realistic." I looked at him then, really looked. My son, 43 years old, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, hands soft, clean, not like mine, not like they used to be when he was younger. "Realistic," I repeated. He nodded. "Yeah." But the word hung there, heavy in a way it didn't used to be. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to move through the trees. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the kind of sound that fills empty spaces. "I walked the property this morning," he added. "Some of the fencing's coming loose, the shed roof sagging on one side." "I know. You can't keep up with all of it forever." I took another sip of coffee. It had gone a little bitter. "Funny thing about forever," I said quietly. "It always sounds shorter when someone else says it." He didn't respond to that. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a folder, set it on the table, neat, organized, city neat. "I talked to someone," he said, A realtor, just to see what the place might be worth. But I stared at the folder, didn't open it, didn't touch it, just stared. You talked to someone, I said. Just information, Dad, that's all. I nodded slowly, but something in my chest felt off. Not sharp pain, not anger, just a shift, like a beam in a house settling where it shouldn't. This land wasn't just dirt and wood. It was years, it was her. It was everything I didn't say out loud. And now it was sitting there in a folder, reduced to numbers. I didn't come here to push you, Daniel said, softer now. I think it's time we start having the conversation. I finally reached out, not for the folder, for the table, ran my hand along the edge where the finish had worn down smooth over the years. I see, I said, and I did, more than he probably realized. The room felt quieter than before. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick slower, like it was waiting. I looked up at him. When were you planning on leaving? I asked. He hesitated. Couple days, he said. Maybe longer, depending. Depending on what? He met my eyes. On how this goes. I gave a small nod. Then I stood up, taking my mug to the sink. All right, I said, my back to him. Then I guess you better stay. I rinsed the cup, listening to the water run, steady and familiar. Behind me I could feel him sitting there, waiting, expecting something, but I didn't turn around, not yet, because something had already started shifting in this house. And I wasn't sure either of us was ready for where it would lead next. Daniel woke up before I did the next morning. I could tell by the smell. Coffee again, strong, just shy of burnt, and something else. Toast, maybe. There was a time when mornings in this house meant noise, cabinet doors opening, radio humming low in the background, her voice moving between rooms like it belonged there. Now it was just the quiet and my son trying to fill it in ways that didn't quite fit. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting my feet find the floor. The wood was cold, always had been in the mornings. I used to like that. Reminded me I was still here. I pulled on my boots and made my way down the hall. Daniel stood at the stove, one hand resting on the counter, the other flipping something in a pan. Eggs, overcooked by the smell of it. You don't have to do that, I said. He glanced over his shoulder. Morning. Morning. I figured I'd make breakfast. I nodded once, stepping into the kitchen. You figured wrong. He smiled a little, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I remember you liked eggs this way, he said. I used to. That landed somewhere between us. He turned back to the stove, finished what he was doing, and slid the eggs onto 2 plates. We sat down at the table again, same seats as yesterday, like we'd fallen into an old pattern neither of us had agreed to. The fork scraped lightly against the plate as I cut into the eggs. Too dry. I ate anyway. Daniel watched me for a second. So, what's on the list today? List? Yeah, things you gotta do around here. I chewed slowly, swallowed. Same as always. Which is? I looked at him. Work. He leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. Not annoyed exactly, just out of sync. I meant maybe I could help, he said, while I'm here. I set my fork down. There's a fence line along the east side, I said after a moment. Posts leaning, needs resetting. Okay. And the shed roof. You mentioned it yesterday, might as well look at it. He nodded. Good, yeah, that's good. We finished breakfast mostly in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where you can feel words sitting just behind someone's teeth, waiting for the right moment that never comes. Outside, the air had that early spring chill. The ground still held onto winter in patches, stubborn like that. I grabbed my tools from the back porch, hammer, level, post digger, and headed toward the fence. Daniel followed, carrying a pair of gloves that looked like they'd never seen real work. We walked side by side for a while without speaking. The land stretched out around us, open and familiar, trees lining the edges, fields uneven but honest. This place didn't pretend to be anything it was. That's the post, I said, nodding ahead. It leaned just enough to be wrong. Daniel stepped up to it, pressed his hand against the wood. Yeah, it's loose. It's been loose for a week. Why didn't you fix it? I shrugged, had other things. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he pulled on the gloves and grabbed the post like he meant to wrestle it back into place by force. It won't go like that, I said. He paused. Then how? I set my tools down and stepped beside him. You gotta take it out first, dig around the base, reset it straight. He nodded like he understood. Then he started digging. For a while we worked without talking. The sound of metal hitting dirt, the scrape of the shovel, our breathing settling into a rhythm that felt almost familiar. Almost. After a few minutes, Daniel stopped, leaning on the shovel. This is harder than it looks, he said. It's not supposed to look easy. He gave a small laugh. Yeah, well, I've been behind a desk too long. I didn't say anything. He went back to digging, slower this time. Sweat started to show at his temples, his movements losing that clean, controlled feel, dirt on his hands, on his shirt. Real work has a way of doing that. You used to make me help with stuff like this, he said after a while. I remember. I hated it back then. I know. He stuck the shovel into the ground and stood up straight, stretching his back. Guess I get why now. I looked at him. Do you? He hesitated. Yeah, I mean it's important, keeping things up, taking care of what you have. That's part of it. What's the other part? I bent down, adjusting the level against the post, made sure it sat straight before we filled the dirt back in. The other part, I said, is knowing why it matters. He didn't answer. We finished resetting the post together, packed the dirt tight around the base. It stood straight now, solid. Daniel stepped back, hands on his hips. There, that should hold. It will. For a second there was something in his expression, something close to pride, then it faded. About yesterday, he said, I kept my eyes on the fence line. What about it? The folder, the realtor. I wiped my hands on my jeans. You already said what you needed to say. I don't think I did. I turned to face him. He looked uncomfortable, not in the physical sense, something deeper, like he'd stepped into a conversation he didn't know how to finish. I'm not trying to take anything from you, he said. I don't want to see this place fall apart. It's not falling apart. It will, he said, a little sharper now. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. I let that sit. You ever think about what happens after? He added, when you're not here. But there it was again, not loud, not angry, just practical. I picked up my hammer, turned it in my hand. This place was here before you started thinking about it, I said, and it'll be here long after. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean. He took a step closer, then say it. I met his eyes. You mean what happens when I'm gone, I said, and what you get. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. No. I'm thinking about the future. So am I. Then why won't you even consider it? I looked past him out over the land, because to him this was land, to me it was a life. You see numbers, I said quietly. I see years. He shook his head. That's not. I built this place, I cut in, not raising my voice, just stating it. Every board, every beam, every inch of that house. Your mother planted those trees, that porch. We sat there every night for 10 years. I paused. You don't get that from a realtor. He didn't speak, didn't argue, just stood there, hands at his sides like he wasn't sure where to put them anymore. A breeze moved through the field, bending the grass just slightly. The kind of movement you only notice when everything else is still. I'm not trying to disrespect that, he said finally, quieter now. It feels like you are. That hit him. I could see it. Not anger this time, something else. He looked down at the dirt around his boots, scuffed and uneven from where we'd been working. I took time off to come here, he said. I thought we could figure something out. I nodded once. Maybe we are, I said. He looked up. What does that mean? I picked up my tools. It means, I said, starting back toward the house, we've got more work to do. I didn't look back to see if he followed, but after a few seconds I heard his footsteps behind me, slower than before, less certain, and somewhere in that distance between us, something had already started slipping. Daniel didn't come out with me the next morning. I noticed it the same way I notice most things these days, by what wasn't there. No coffee smell drifting down the hall, no sound of cabinets opening, just the house settling into itself, quiet and steady like it always had before he showed up. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out toward the shed. The roof sagged more on the left side than I remembered. Or maybe I just hadn't been looking at it the right way. There's a difference between seeing something and knowing what it means. I poured myself a cup of coffee, lighter this time, and stepped out onto the porch. The wood creaked under my boots. That sound at least hadn't changed. For a moment I just stood there. The land stretched out in front of me, same as it always had. But something felt narrower, like the edges had moved in while I wasn't paying attention. Or maybe it was just me. I took a slow sip, then set the mug down on the railing. All right, I muttered. Let's see. The shed sat about 50 yards out. Built it 25 years ago. Pine frame, tin roof. Nothing fancy, but it held what it needed to: tools, old plans, pieces of work that didn't have a place inside the house but couldn't be thrown away either. I walked out there alone. Each step felt heavier than it should have, though I couldn't say why. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old wood. Familiar. Honest. Sunlight slipped through a crack in the wall, cutting a thin line across the workbench. That bench I'd built at the winter after Daniel left for college. Didn't have much to do with my hands back then. Too much quiet in the house. I ran my fingers along its surface now, feeling the grooves and marks left behind over the years. Every scratch had a story, every dent a moment. Most people wouldn't see that. They'd just see a worn-out piece of wood. I sat down on the stool, the same one I used back then, and let the silence settle around me. Daniel's words from yesterday drifted back in. What happens after? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Truth is, I'd thought about it, more than I ever said out loud. Not in numbers or paperwork like he had, not in square footage or market value. I thought about it in smaller ways. Who would know which drawer the good nails were in? Who'd remember that the back door sticks in the winter unless you lift it just right? Who'd understand that the porch light flickers because I wired it myself one late night when I couldn't sleep? Those aren't things you write down. Those are things you live. I let out a slow breath and looked around the shed. Then my eyes landed on something I hadn't touched in years, an old wooden chest tucked beneath the bench. I slid it out, brushed off the dust, and opened it. Inside were the plans, hand-drawn, yellowed at the edges, the original layout of the house, the porch extension, the shed itself, and on top of it all, a smaller piece of paper, Daniel's handwriting, a rough sketch of a treehouse. He must have been 10, maybe 11. I remembered the day he handed it to me, all excited, talking fast, pointing at crooked lines like they were something real already. "Can we build this, Dad?" I'd said yes, of course I did. We built it together out back near the old maple, took us 2 weekends. He hammered nails, crooked, missed more than he hit, laughed every time. That treehouse is probably still there. Or what's left of it. I stared at the drawing for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and set it aside. That's when the thought came, not sudden, not loud, just clear, like something finally settling into place after being loose for too long. I closed the chest and stood up. Outside, the wind had picked up a little. I could hear it moving through the trees again, steady and low. When I walked back to the house, Daniel was sitting on the porch steps, phone in his hand. He looked up as I approached like he'd been waiting. "Hey," he said. "Hey. You were out in the shed." "I was." He nodded. "I was thinking maybe we should call that realtor, just talk, no commitments." I set my tools down by the door. "No." The word came out simple, final. He blinked. "No." "No." He stood up slowly. "You're not even going to consider it." I did. And I'm not interested." His jaw tightened again. I could see the frustration building, the way it always did when things didn't move the way he expected. "This isn't just about you," he said. "It is right now." "What about me?" he pushed. "What about my family, my kids?" I looked at him. For a second I saw the boy he used to be, standing there waiting for me to agree to something. But that boy was gone. "You've got your own life," I said. "Your own house, your own work." "That's not the point." "It is to me." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this." I let that word hang there, stubborn. "Maybe because I'm not done yet," I said. "With what?" he asked. I glanced back toward the shed. "Figuring out what stays," I said, "and what goes." He followed my gaze, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "this place isn't just something I'm holding onto until you decide what to do with it." "That's not what I know what you meant," I cut in, calm but steady. "And I know what you didn't mean." He went quiet, that silence again, thicker this time. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do, not until that moment. "I'm meeting someone this afternoon," I said. He frowned. "Who?" "Name S. Carl Henderson. Lives a couple miles down the road." "What for?" I picked up the folded piece of paper from my pocket, the treehouse sketch, rolled it between my fingers. "He stopped by last week," I said. "Saw the work I'd been doing on the fence, asked about the shed." Daniel's expression shifted. "Okay." "He's got a grandson," I continued. "Kid S been drawing things, wants to build something of his own." Daniel stared at me, not quite following yet. "I told him I'd take a look at the drawings," I said. "Maybe help him get started." There was a pause, then. "You're serious?" Daniel asked. "Yeah." "You're going to, what, build someone else's project now?" I shrugged lightly. "Maybe." He let out a short breath, disbelief creeping in. "So that's it. You won't even think about your own family, but you've got time for some neighbor's kid." That one landed, not loud but deep. I held his gaze. "Sometimes," I said quietly. It's easier to give something to someone who knows what it is. He didn't respond, didn't argue, just stood there, the distance between us stretching wider than the land behind him. I slipped the paper back into my pocket and stepped past him into the house. Behind me, I heard him shift his weight like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. And as the screen door closed with a soft click, I had a feeling that whatever came next was going to change more than just the land. Daniel didn't say much after that. Not that afternoon, not during dinner, not even later when the house settled into that familiar quiet and we found ourselves in separate rooms, doing separate things like strangers sharing a roof. But silence has a weight to it. And his was getting heavier. Carl Henderson showed up right on time the next day. Old pickup, faded red, engine louder than it needed to be. I liked him for that already. He stepped out slow like a man who knew his joints better than he used to. "Walter," he said, offering a hand. "Carl." His grip was firm, honest. Behind him, a boy climbed out of the truck, couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, thin, curious eyes, holding a folded piece of paper like it mattered. "This is my grandson, Eli," Carl said. The boy nodded, didn't say much, just watched everything. I understood that kind. "Got something you want to show him?" Carl nudged. Eli stepped forward, handed me the paper. I unfolded it carefully. Crooked lines, uneven angles, a ladder that leaned too far to one side. But the idea was there, clear as day, a small treehouse. I smiled without meaning to. "Looks like you've been thinking about this a while," I said. He nodded. "Yes, sir." "Got a spot picked out?" He pointed past the field. "That tree, the big one." I followed his finger. Strong trunk, good height, branches that could hold weight if you built it right. "Good choice," I said. Behind me, I heard the screen door open. Daniel. He stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed, watching. Didn't say anything, didn't have to. We spent the morning walking the land with Eli, talking through the build. I showed him how to look at the tree, how to think about weight, balance, where the boards would sit. He listened, really listened, every word. That mattered more than anything. At one point, I handed him my tape measure. "Go on," I said. "Measure from here to that branch." He fumbled with it at first. Tape snapped back once, twice. Then he figured it out. Carl chuckled. "He's stubborn." "Good," I said. "Helps." From the porch, I could feel Daniel's eyes on us. That quiet kind of watching. Not curiosity, something else. By the time Carl and Eli left, the sun was high and my shirt stuck to my back. We hadn't built anything yet, just planned, but it felt like more than that. It felt like something had started. I stood by the truck as they pulled away, dust rising behind them. "You coming inside?" Daniel's voice came from behind me. "In a minute." He didn't move, just stood there. "You really doing this?" he asked. I turned to face him. "Yeah." "But for them? For the kid?" He shook his head slowly, like he still couldn't quite believe it. "I don't get it," he said. "You won't even sit down with a realtor, but you've got all the time in the world for this." "It's not the same thing." "It is to me." I nodded once. "That's the problem." His jaw tightened again. "You think I don't appreciate what you built?" he said. I didn't answer. "You think I don't see it?" he pushed. "I think you see it differently." "How?" he snapped. I took a breath, kept my voice level. "You see something to manage," I said. "Something to organize, maybe sell, maybe split up." "And you don't." "I see something that isn't finished." He let out a short, frustrated laugh. "It's a house, Dad, and land, that's it." That one sat heavy. Not because it was loud, because it was simple, too simple. I stepped closer just enough so he had to meet my eyes. "No," I said quietly, "it's not." He looked away first. That told me more than anything he'd said. That evening things got worse. Not all at once, just piece by piece. We sat at the table again, dinner between us, barely touched. "I made some calls today," Daniel said finally. I didn't look up. "Yeah." "Yeah." Silence stretched. "I talked to a lawyer." That got my attention. I set my fork down slowly. "For what?" He leaned forward slightly. "Just to understand things, legally." "Legally?" I repeated. "Inheritance, property rights, that kind of stuff." I studied his face. Serious, not angry, certain. "You planning something?" I asked. "I'm preparing," he said. "For what?" "For when this becomes my responsibility." I let out a slow breath. "There it is," I said. "What?" "What you think you deserve." His eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "Then what is it?" "It's reality," he shot back. "You're 68, Dad. You live alone on 10 acres you can barely keep up with. At some point this will be mine to deal with." "To deal with," I repeated. "Yes." I nodded slowly, leaning back in my chair. Funny, I said. I never thought of it that way. How did you think of it? He challenged. I looked down at the table, ran my hand along that worn edge again. I thought of it as something you'd understand, I said. He didn't respond, because he couldn't. Not really. But later that night I stepped out onto the porch. The air had cooled, crickets starting up in the distance, the kind of night that used to feel full. Now it just felt wide. After a minute I heard the door behind me, softer this time. Daniel stepped out, didn't stand next to me, stayed a few feet away. I didn't mean it like that, he said. I kept my eyes on the dark field ahead. You did. He shifted, uncomfortable. I don't want this to become a burden. It already is, I said. That caught him off guard. What? Not the land, I said. This. I gestured lightly between us. He went quiet. I came here to help, he said after a moment. I know. Then why does it feel like I'm the bad guy? I thought about that, longer than I expected to. Then I said, because you're trying to take something before you know what it is. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just stood there breathing slow. From inside the house a faint sound carried out. Laughter, small, light. Daniel turned toward it. What's that? I didn't answer right away, because I knew Carl's truck must have pulled back in. And Eli. Eli was inside. I could picture it already. That boy standing in the kitchen looking around like it meant something. Daniel took a step toward the door, paused, then looked back at me. What are you doing, Dad? He asked quietly. I finally met his eyes. Deciding, I said, and for the first time since he arrived. I saw something in his face that hadn't been there before. Not frustration, not anger, something closer to fear. And as the sound of that boy's laughter drifted out into the night, I realized we were standing right at the edge of something neither of us could step back from. Eli's laughter didn't belong in that house, not because it was wrong, because it was new. It moved through the rooms like light through a place that had gotten used to shadows, soft at first, careful, then a little louder like it was testing the walls. I stepped inside. Daniel followed behind me, slower this time. Eli stood near the kitchen table, looking at the old clock on the wall, the one with the uneven tick. He pulled a chair closer, standing on it just to get a better look. It's loud, he said, not turning around. It is, I replied. He looked back at me. I like it. I nodded once. Carl stood by the door, hat in his hands. Sorry to drop back in like this. He forgot his drawing. Eli held it up, smiling like it mattered more than anything. Can't build without the plan, he said. That hit somewhere deep. I walked over and took the paper, smoothing it out on the table. The lines were still crooked, still imperfect, still honest. Daniel stayed near the doorway, watching, not stepping in, not yet. Show me again, I said to Eli, where the ladder goes. He climbed down from the chair and came around, pointing with both hands, explaining things in pieces that didn't quite connect, but the intention was there. And that's what mattered. As he talked, I felt it. Something shifting. Not in the house, in me. We sat there for a while, me and the kid, talking through boards and angles where the weight would sit, how to make something strong enough to hold. Carl didn't say much, just watched, quiet and steady. Daniel stayed back until he didn't. You're going to need cross support here, he said suddenly, stepping closer to the table. Eli looked up at him. So it doesn't wobble, Daniel added, softer now. I glanced at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the drawing, really looking. Yeah, I said. He's right. Eli nodded like he just learned something important. Daniel reached for the pencil on the table, hesitated for a second, then added a line to the sketch. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. We stood there, the three of us, around that table I built 30 years ago, adding something small to a piece of paper that didn't mean much to anyone else. But it meant something here. Later, after Carl and Eli left for good, the house didn't feel as empty, still quiet, but different, like it had remembered something. Daniel stayed in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. You're giving it away, he said after a while. I poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of him. Not everything, I said. He picked up the mug, turned it slowly in his hands. But something, he said. Yeah. Why? I thought about that, about the shed, the plans, the treehouse we built all those years ago, about the way Eli listened, about the way Daniel used to. Because holding onto it doesn't mean anything if no one knows what it is, I said. He didn't answer right away, just stared into the coffee like he had that first morning. I didn't mean what I said, he said finally, about it just being a house. I know, but I said it anyway. I nodded, yeah. Silence again, but it wasn't as sharp this time. He set the mug down. I don't know how to see it the way you do, he admitted. That's all right. Is it? I looked at him, really looked. For the first time since he got here, I wasn't seeing the man who walked in with a folder. I was seeing the boy who once handed me a crooked drawing and believed we could build it together. "It takes time," I said. He let out a breath. I thought I was running out of it. "You're not," I said. "You're just late." That almost made him smile. The next morning we walked out to the old maple tree, the one where the first treehouse still stood, barely, boards weathered gray, nails rusted, one side leaning just enough to remind you it wouldn't last much longer. Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets. "I forgot about this," he said. I didn't. He reached out, pressed his hand against the wood, same way I had with the gate, feeling it, not measuring it. "We built this in 2 weekends," he said. "3, I corrected. You kept missing the nails." He let out a quiet laugh. "Yeah." We stood there a while, no rush, no plan, just the two of us and something we'd made together a long time ago. After a bit, Eli's drawing found its way into my hands again. I looked at the tree. Then at Daniel. "We could fix this," I said. He glanced at me. "Or build a new one." I nodded. "Yeah, maybe that." "For him?" he asked. I shook my head slightly. "For anyone who needs it," I said. He took that in. Then, after a moment, "For us?" he said. I met his eyes. "Yeah," I said, "for us." But we didn't talk about the realtor again, didn't need to. The folder stayed where he left it, closed, unopened. Maybe it always would be, maybe not, didn't matter as much anymore, because some things don't get passed down in papers, they get passed down in moments, in work, in quiet understanding. Daniel picked up a loose board from the ground, turned it in his hands like he was remembering something. "Show me where to start," he said. I stepped beside him, pointing toward the base of the tree. "Right here," I said, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like I was losing anything, just building something again, slowly, the right way, together. Some things you leave behind, and some things finally learn how to stay.